Hi everyone. I'm going to take a little time in this video to go over the PowerPoint on the writing process. Go ahead and bring that up here. All right. So in the previous lesson, we learned just a little bit of basic information about things you need to consider when you are tasked with writing an essay. We focused on why writing is an important element of academia and life. You know, it is how we communicate our ideas effectively in written form, and how it's important to have a focused point and then to effectively support that point, to explain your point. And we learned that, you know, if you really try to write effectively, not only are you going to be successful at conveying your ideas in written form, but it also helps you become better at verbally explaining yourself as well. It helps make you a better speaker and a better thinker. You know, if you can sort of get into the habit of, you know, thinking, what is my focus point? What am I really trying to say? And then how can I best support or explain that? So we also learned that before we really start to write something, we need to consider what we call the rhetorical situation, which includes narrowing that focus on your topic so that it's, you know, that you're really sort of like laser focused in, narrowed in on exactly what you're trying to convey. We learned about angle, which was, you know, what are you bringing to the table that is different and unique about your topic? Because especially when we're writing essays or, you know, papers of any sort, there's a really good chance that whatever you're writing about has been written about by many, many other people. So what are you bringing to the table that's different than that's not just the same as what everybody else has already written? We talked about purpose, making sure that there is an underlying purpose to what you're writing. You know, it's are you trying to inform? Are you trying to persuade? Are you trying to explain, you know, a cause and effect relationship? Are you trying to, you know, compare or contrast two different things? You know, you need to make sure that there is a reason behind the topic and your point of view that you're taking with your topic. We learned about, you know, sorry, put my phone on silent. We learned about making sure that you have considered your audience when you write something, and that your reader, you know, you shouldn't think of your reader just as your instructor. You know, you need to have sort of a larger hypothetical audience in mind. And based on that audience and based on your purpose, what is the best tone to take? So there were all these different things that we learned that we need to think about and be considering even before we really start to write anything. However, sometimes we do need to write something before we can really figure out all those elements of the rhetorical situation. Then, you know, once we have used some form of writing to sort of gather our thoughts and figure out what direction we want to go in, then we sort of progress through other stages of the writing process. So that's what we're going to focus on here in this lesson, is how do we use the different stages of the writing process, you know, to help get us from, you know, a ton of ideas to something very focused and polished, right? So we're going to boil the writing process down to 4 steps. Step 1 is discovering a point, right? We talked about that in the previous lesson, that, you know, you need to have a very focused point, that it cannot be super broad. We will often need to use pre-writing techniques to help us discover that point. And that's what I meant by, even though we're supposed to be thinking about that rhetorical situation from the start, sometimes it requires us to write something in order to figure out those elements of the rhetorical situation, especially that focused topic. And that's where pre-writing comes in. It's nothing formal yet, and it's just for you, the pre-writing. It's just for you to get started. But that is the first step, is using pre-writing to think about things and record your ideas so that you can then get to your point. We're going to be looking at pre-writing techniques here in just a few moments. Step 2 then, once you have your focused topic, then you need to develop your support of that topic. This will often come through even more pre-writing, maybe research and outlining. We're going to take a look at how to use an outline as well today. Then your next step, once you sort of have your focused point and you know how you're going to support it, then it's time to actually organize that material and write a first draft. And it is that outlining that we'll talk about in step 2 that can really assist you when you get to step 3. In fact, the outline is sort of the bridge between step 2 and step 3. Depending on how you sort of view your own writing process, you might see it as part of developing your support, or you might see it as part of how you figure out how to organize your ideas. So it really can fit under both steps, or you can see it as like the bridge between the two. All right, so then you write your first draft. Step 4 then is revising and editing the essay or whatever it is you've written. All right, and so revising isn't just looking for spelling and grammar errors. Revising actually refers to making bigger scale changes to make the whole essay more effective. Editing and proofreading is when we get into the smaller details, more like a sentence level details, right? They are both part of the 4th step, but just, revising does not just mean looking for those really small errors. You need to correct the big issues first before you worry about those really small details. Okay, so we're gonna go through this process. We will spend most of our time in steps 1 through 3. And then later in the term, when you are actually have already written your first draft, your rough draft of your paper, then we will sort of hone in more on step 4, the revision process. I don't want to overwhelm you right now. I'd rather wait until you can actually use the information in the moment, because you will be at that stage with your own research paper at that point. All right, so we're going to focus most on discovering your point through pre-writing, how to develop solid support for your topic, and then how to use an outline and, get into that first draft. So you will sometimes hear me refer to these steps with different terminology, and that's what I wanted to sort of show you on this slide, is that those 4 steps can sometimes be referred to as the 4 bases of writing. So if you are making a point and sticking to that point, right, you have a focused point and you make sure that your entire essay, everything in that essay directly relates back to that point, then your writing will have unity. Unity is the first base of writing. If you back up that point with specific evidence, right, that was step 2, then your writing will have support. If you have effectively organized your main ideas and you have connected all of your thoughts along the way, your writing will have coherence. And then if you write, if you have taken care of those small sentence level issues, then your writing will demonstrate effective sentence skills. So again, we'll sort of be hitting revision and sentence skills in week 6 and 7. But next week, we will focus a lot of attention on unity, support, and coherence. So that's why I wanted to sort of throw those terms out now so that when you get to those lessons next week, you will understand how they relate to the 4 steps of the writing process that, we're talking about today, right? So first things first, you have to come up with your focused topic, right? Topic is the first element of the rhetorical situation. And clearly, if you don't have a topic that is manageable, then you can't really write an effective essay no matter how hard you try. So I really encourage you to use some sort of pre-writing technique to help you narrow in on a manageable topic and narrow in on the specific main points that you want to use to support that topic. So the ones that we are going to look at here are free writing, questioning, listing, clustering, and outlining. All right. So free writing is really exactly what it sounds like. Free writing, like writing freely. So one good way to practice this technique is to set a timer for like 10 minutes or so and just start writing about the general topic that you have in mind and just go. Try to just keep writing until the timer goes off. You're not worrying about spelling or punctuation, or you're not going to erase mistakes. You're not worried about how it's organized or even about finding the exact words that you're looking for. You just write without stopping. It's a great way to sort of take the pressure off of yourself so that you don't feel like you have to be on point with everything that you write down, and you can just let your brain run free. Even if you start to go off topic, like you started with this general topic in mind and you started writing about that topic, and then at some point your brain shifts gears and you realize that you're writing about something entirely different, just keep going with it, because it's not going to hurt anything. It might seem like a waste of time, but it might not be. It might be that, that tangent that your brain took you on might be better for you than what your original general topic was. Maybe that's what you thought you wanted to write about, but as your brain just went off and did its own thing, you come to realize that no, it's actually this other thing over here that I thought was completely unrelated. Maybe it is completely unrelated, but it's actually what I want to write about. So it wasn't a waste of time. And sometimes you just don't, you'd be surprised what little, nuggets of goodness can come from just continuing to write nonstop, and just giving yourself the freedom to do that. You will actually be using this technique for project part 1. So I hope that you use it to your full advantage. I'll be reading it, but it really is mostly for you. So just go with it and see where it takes you. And if like I said, I'll be reading it and giving you feedback on all of project part 1. When I look at your free write, I might even say, you had a really cool idea here in the free writing section. I don't really see you mentioning it anywhere else though. So maybe you want to go back and think about, that idea, because it might be worth exploring or something to that effect. But there's no rules to free writing other than don't feel pressured to be perfect with it, and just keep writing. Right? Second pre-writing technique is questioning. It's literally just writing down a question and coming up with as many answers to it as you can. And so it's sort of like reporter questions: who, what, when, where, why, and how. And it can get you to think about a topic from different angles. And you will be using questioning to a limited extent in project part 1 as well. There are actual questions that are provided to you that you will then answer about your topic and your thoughts on that topic as of that moment. But it can get you to sort of, and I think one of the great things about questioning is it might not necessarily help with determining your focused topic as much, although it can. I think that this questioning technique really helps determine your purpose and your audience, and sometimes even your angle. And that might make more sense when you get to the specific questions that you'll be answering in project part 1. But it's it's a great way to force yourself to think outside of how you've already been thinking of your topic. Because usually, especially like with free writing and things like that, we are very much in our own heads and thinking from our own perspectives and what we're interested in, what we already know, what we want to know about our topic. And questioning can kind of force you to go out and around that and think about who else cares about this issue, what do they think about this issue, what might they want to know about this issue, what do I want them to gain from it, that sort of thing. So it can really help with those other elements of the rhetorical situation that we can easily forget about in the beginning. All right, so the next one is listing, brainstorming, right? So it's not really free writing because you're not writing full thoughts. You're just writing down words or phrases as they occur to you. And again, no rules here. You don't have to worry about, listing things in a specific order or grouping them in any way. It's just as the ideas come to you, you write them down one after another. And then you can go back to the list and think, okay, what can I use on this list? Do any of these ideas sort of go together, right? And you can create the organization after the fact. But in the moment when you're using this technique, it's, again, no rules. You are just, jotting down ideas as they come to you. So it is like free writing in that respect, where there's no rules and it's just as the ideas come, you write them. The difference, though, is that, listing can be a little faster because you're not writing full sentences. The downside is that because it's going so fast, you don't necessarily have that moment where your brain sort of takes that detour necessarily, because you're not giving your brain time to wander off. And again, that might seem like a good thing. But if you are really searching for ideas about your topic and you're really undecided about things, free writing is the way to go, because that gives your brain time to wander around and be adventurous. If you're fairly certain about your topic, and maybe you've even already been thinking about it before you sit down to do any of the pre-writing, listing might be an okay technique to use at that point, because you don't necessarily need to figure out exactly what you want to write about. Now you're just trying to figure out what you want to include about that topic. So it's kind of, they're similar, but they have some distinct differences. And neither one is better or worse than the other, free writing and listing. It's just, what do you need? What are you hoping to gain from your pre-writing? And that'll help determine which one is better suited. Then we have clustering. You may have also heard this as webbing or mapping. This is where you start with your general topic in a circle in the middle of the paper here, the writing process. And then you just, as ideas come to you, you draw a line off of that circle and jot down that idea and put it in a circle. And then you just keep doing that. You almost have to have a somewhat organized brain to do clustering effectively, because you do have to sort of, like, okay, I'm talking about the writing process. Okay, I know pre-writing is one thing. I know a first draft is another thing that comes with the writing process. I know that outlining is a pre-writing technique. And if I'm not careful, I might make another big line right here and put outlining in a big circle, just like I did pre-writing and just like I did first draft. But really, outlining comes off of pre-writing. So you kind of have to be aware of these first level circles so that you'll know if any additional ideas you come up with require their own first level circles, or if they are a second level circle off of one of these main ones. I struggle with clustering for that reason. And then my clustering really just ended up being brainstorming that's just all over the page. This technique works really well for some people. And occasionally it works well for me, but only when I already have a really good handle on my topic and my main points. Like if I already know that this is my focus topic and these are my 3 main points, I can then use clustering to help come up with my examples for each main point. And then I have a visual that's a little easier for my brain to follow. Like if I were doing this clustering right here, I would have started with the writing process in the middle, and then pre-writing, first draft, revision, proofreading, and publishing already in place. I would have had to have already known that those were my main points. And then I can use this technique of the secondary and tertiary circles to come up with my examples, my support for each main idea. And, that helps me, because then I have it's almost like a visual, an organized way of looking at all of my ideas for each main point. And then I can look and decide, which of these do I actually want to use. So that's always the caveat I give the clustering is if your brain isn't, doesn't love this technique, it can get messy and confusing, especially if all you know for sure is your topic, the circle in the middle. But you may have a brain that takes to this really well because it is such a visual technique. All right, and then we have outlining. So you remember I said that outlining can be considered part of step 2, which is gathering your ideas, how you're going to support your topic. Or it could be considered part of step 3, which is organizing your ideas. Or it could be seen as the bridge. It's considered technically a pre-writing technique because you're still not writing anything formal yet. You're still not writing the essay yet. But outlining is really like the second step of pre-writing, because those first 4 techniques that we just looked at, those are the techniques that will help you gather ideas so that then you have ideas to choose from to effectively support each main point and effectively support your overall main focus topic. But then you have to decide, okay, now I have my main points and I'm pretty sure I know which examples and explanations I'm going to use for each main point. Now what? outlining is the next step, because then it allows you a visual organization tool. All right, so once you have looked over all of the information that you've gathered through those first 4 pre-writing techniques, whichever one you used, or maybe you used more than one, you gather all that information and you start with a working thesis statement. So a thesis statement expresses the focused topic that you'll be writing about, with your main points included in it. So if I were going to write, this wouldn't be a research paper, but if I were going to write an essay on a restaurant, trying to convince people that they should go to this restaurant, my thesis statement might say something like, Olive Garden is a great place to dine because of their cleanliness, service, and food. That's my focused topic. Olive Garden, that it's a great place to eat, and the 3 specific reasons why I think that. And those 3 specific reasons would then be my 3 main points in the body of my essay. So I would then, go on to talk about how clean the place is, and I would give examples and explain it. And then I would move on to the service and give examples and explain it. Then move on to the food, give examples and explain it. But the whole idea is to have a working thesis statement when you get to the point where you're ready to outline. We will learn about thesis statements in great detail next week. So don't feel like I'm throwing that term out there and then abandoning it. It's a huge element of essay writing, and there's a whole lesson on it next week. But I do need to sort of introduce it to you now, because it is part of a scratch outline. Once you have a working thesis statement, you'll put it at the top of your scratch outline, and then you'll start filling in the outline, right? It is a great way to organize your ideas and to see if you need to gather more information for any one section. All right, it's sort of, you can think of your outline as a plan or a blueprint for the essay. It's the skeleton of the essay. And it can be changed. Just because you fill the outline in doesn't mean it has to be set in stone. You can make changes to it, but whatever is in place on the outline when you go to start writing your rough draft, what's on that outline should be your plan. You should be sure of it at that time, so that then you can refer back to it as you draft the essay. That outline will help make sure that you're staying on track, that you are executing that plan as you originally envisioned it. Such a useful tool. But I'm going to show you a template for a scratch outline right here. Okay. So, like I said, you would put your working thesis statement at the top. Right? And it's a working thesis statement. The whole outline is a working outline, right? So everything on the outline, again, can be altered and changed if you deem necessary. So your thesis statement, by the time you get to the final draft of your essay, that thesis statement needs to be solid, precise, focused, and set in stone. But here on the scratch outline, and even as you are doing the rough draft, that thesis statement is always a work in progress. It can always be revised if needed. Everything else on the outline can as well. But you want to start thinking about, okay, what is my first main point going to be? Well, going back to my example, my first main point is Olive Garden is a great place to dine because they're always clean. And then I would provide here on and I would write that here on this line. I would either write out that full sentence or just put cleanliness. It is a scratch outline, so you don't necessarily need complete sentences on it, but you can if that helps you. And then I would just jot down the examples that I'm going to use of how they always have a clean establishment. My second main point would be the service. And then I would write that on this line. And then I would, on these lines, jot down the specific examples that I want to use that show how they always provide nice service. My third main point would be the food. So I would jot that on this line. And then here in lines A, B, and C, I would jot down my ideas, the specific examples that I plan on using to explain why the food is so great. And then I would have some sort of concluding statement or final thought. Probably, with my example, it would be recommending the restaurant to the readers, something to that effect. And, again, all of this is a work in progress. You can come back and start changing things. Like maybe here in the cleanliness section, I had, my 3 examples on these 3 lines. And then as I'm thinking about it, or maybe as I'm even starting to work on the draft, I realized that one of those examples really isn't all that great. Or I thought of an additional example that I want to use instead of one that I had already written down. I'll come back and just, amend the outline real quick so that I can then stay focused. So it's all a work in progress, but having the visual blueprint here, the skeleton of the essay, really helps. I have to say that one of the other courses that I teach is also a composition course, but it is it's not part of the nursing program. So it is not sort of the double whammy that we get with this course, where it's basic composition plus research in APA format together. Theirs is just basic essay writing, basic composition skills. And the course culminates with a 5-paragraph essay that they write in week 10. And in week 9, they have a required assignment where they have to fill in an outline for their essay. They have to fill it in and submit it and receive full points on it in order to even access the final exam essay in the last week. It's a release condition. And since I started doing it that way, making it a release condition, making it so that students had to fill in the outline and had to receive full points on it, almost every single student gets an A on that final essay. It's crazy. The difference between when the outline was an optional assignment versus a required assignment that they had to score full points on. Basically, like if they submit the outline and there's issues, there's problems, then they get a 0. I tell them what needs to be fixed, and then they have to resubmit it. They have to get full points on it in order for the release condition to get triggered for the final exam essay. And it's amazing how much that outline helps those students write very strong essays. I really can't recommend using an outline enough. It's a stellar way of making sure you know how you want the essay organized, how you want each main point to be supported, and then it helps keep you on track as you're drafting. You're less likely to get lost in the draft or lose focus or lose your train of thought. You have this blueprint that you can keep referring back to so that you stay on point. Great tool. So, go back to our PowerPoint here. Right. So we looked at the scratch outline. And now we're going to look at putting them into practice, so to speak. So we read an essay in the previous lesson, My Job at an Apple Plant. And we're kind of going about it backwards. We've already read the essay. But what we have here is that student's outline for the essay. So they had their working thesis statement, right? Working in an apple plant was the worst job ever. Their first main point, and they had two supporting ideas. So the work was physically hard. That was the first main point, the first reason why it was an awful job. And then their examples were how they had to stack the cartons, how each carton weighed 25 pounds, right? The second main point was the pay was bad. These were their examples of why the pay was bad. Their third main point was the horrible working conditions, and these were their specific examples of the horrible working conditions. And then their concluding and final thought was, apples are sweet, but this job was bitter. They didn't end up including that in the essay. I wish they had, because I kind of liked it, but but still, you can see, if you remember, let's actually, here, we'll bring it up. There we go. So looking there, none of these jobs was as dreadful as my job in an apple plant. The work was physically hard, the pay was poor, and most of all, the working conditions were dismal. That thesis statement is very close to what he had on his outline. And then, first of all, the job made enormous demands of my strength and energy. So he definitely followed through on what his first main point was going to be, and then those examples, right? Taking cartons that rolled down a metal track, each carton contained 12 heavy cans of apple juice, how fast they came down, and then he even went into more detail once he got to the draft, right? So he even added more examples. And then the pay, right? He used those examples for why the pay was so bad. And then the third main point, the working conditions, right? 10-minute breaks, half hour for lunch, spent outside loading the dock in zero temperatures, the apple vats, right? So that outline helped keep him on track as he was writing the essay. Back here. All right, so we're going to have a little practice here. What we have is a potential outline, except it's not organized the way the outline should be. We have our thesis statement at the top. We have our concluding / final thought at the bottom, but the main points and supporting examples aren't organized. They're just listed right here in the middle, one right after another. And they're not even grouped together in any way. So this is sort of to check if you understand, based on what the thesis statement says, can you figure out what the main points are, and then which supporting ideas go with each main point? Can you take the list and fill in the outline accordingly? So our thesis statement is that implementing year-round school would benefit society. So we know, based on that thesis statement, that this essay is trying to show us the benefits of implementing year-round school. That means our main point, each main point, needs to signify a benefit of year-round school. It needs to specify what benefit that main point is focusing on. Our supporting examples might also mention a specific benefit, but it's not going to be signifying, it's not going to be signaling us that that's the benefit. It is going to be explaining that benefit. All right, so here are the ideas that we have to work with. Students attend school more days than within traditional calendars. No need to spend first quarter learning again what was forgotten over the summer. No need for families to find childcare for the summer break. It helps students maintain and reinforce learning. Less review time equals more time to study new subjects. Helps family with scheduling and budgeting. Eliminates the expense of privately funded activities during the summer. Allows teachers to teach subjects more in depth. And more school days allow for greater exposure to new concepts and information. Okay, so we first need to figure out what the main points are. Which sentences on this list signify a benefit of year-round school? All right, students attend more school days than within traditional calendars. That's not naming or signaling one of the benefits. That sounds more like an example or an explanation. No need to spend first quarter learning again what was forgotten over the summer. That certainly sounds like it is some type of benefit, but it's not signaling to me in a very clear, focused manner exactly what benefit we're looking at. Okay, so they don't have to spend the time relearning things. Is that the benefit in and of itself, or is that related? Is that an example of a specific benefit? Well, we're not quite sure yet. So that could possibly be a main point. No need for families to find childcare for the summer break. Okay, again, that could be a main point, but I would just expect that, I would expect the specific benefits, the main points, to be worded in a very clear, simple manner. Both of these are a little wordy to be the main points, but we'll see. Helps students maintain and reinforce learning. That sounds like a benefit. That sounds like a clearly worded, effective main point. Helps students maintain and reinforce learning. All right, less review time equals more time to study new subjects. That kind of seems like it relates to this one up here, but it's a different thing. So I don't know if either of these are a main point or if they're both examples. All right, just keep it in mind. Helps families with scheduling and budgeting. Oh, this relates back up here to this one. No need for families to find childcare for the summer break. Yeah, that sounds like a schedule thing. Helps families with scheduling and budgeting. How does it help with scheduling? There's no need to find childcare if kids are going to school year round. So this is likely our next main point, and that was one of the supporting examples. Eliminates the expense of privately funded activities during summer. That also relates to the families, and that's the example of how it helps with budgeting. All right, so I think we're pretty clear on this one. This is a main point. This is the first supporting example that goes with that main point. This is the second supporting example that goes with that main point. Allows teachers to teach subjects more in depth. Whoops. Sorry. That sounds like a main point also. It's worded very clearly. So it's almost like we've got how implementing year-round school helps the students, how it helps families, and how it helps teachers. Those are our 3 main points. Let's take a look over here. Yep, first main point, helps families with scheduling and budgeting. No need for families to find childcare for the summer break, eliminates the expensive privately funded activities during summer. Our second main point, helps students maintain and reinforce learning. How does it do that? Well, students attend more school days. That means there's no need to spend the first quarter learning what they forgot over the summer. The third main point, it allows teachers to teach subjects in more depth. How does it do that? How does year-round school help teachers do that? Well, if there's less review time, that means there's more time to study new subjects, and more school days allows for greater exposure to new concepts and information. So, kind of tricky when it's not your topic, your main points, your supporting ideas. I understand that, but it is good to practice this type of thing because, again, it helps make that connection between thesis statement, main points, and supporting ideas so that you don't end up with a supporting idea in the spot where a main point should be. And you might think, well, how would that happen? And it's because if you're not trying to organize your ideas, they can sort of become unruly and end up in places they don't belong. Not that they don't belong in the essay, but they might belong in a different spot in the essay. Or they might need to function in a different way in the essay. So taking a look at something like this, where everything is, out of order, and then trying to figure out what would the outline look like, what should it look like, it can help you start to differentiate between main points and supporting ideas. And there's another one here if you want to practice that. I'm going to go ahead and move on, but the answers are here if you want to check yourself after you've looked. So anyway, we have gone through the pre-writing techniques, right? So we looked at free writing, questioning, listing / brainstorming, clustering, and then how to create a working thesis statement to put at the top of a scratch outline, and then how to go about trying to fill in that scratch outline and why it helps. Very beneficial. And once you do that and you have an outline that looks pretty good, then it's time to start drafting. Now you're actually going to start writing the essay. You're going to look at that outline and you're going to make sure that everything on the outline supports and develops your focused topic that you put forth in the thesis statement. If there's anything on the outline that seems to go off topic, cross it out. Remember, step 1 is making a point and sticking to it. You have to have unity. You can't go off topic anywhere in the essay, right? So every body paragraph needs to relate directly to your thesis statement in some way. Every sentence in a body paragraph needs to relate to the main point of that paragraph in some way. And if there's anything in the essay that doesn't belong, it needs to come out. So check your outline first, right? Check your outline first, because if there's anything that doesn't fit on that outline, then you can get rid of that right away and not worry about it accidentally bleeding over into the essay as well. Because then once it's in the essay, it's a little harder to revise because you might be taking out a whole paragraph or maybe just part of a paragraph. And that can be, it's like if you can avoid that happening in the first place, why wouldn't you? All right. Once you feel like the outline's ready, then you start writing your first draft. And then you just go section by section, and it's saying, write it sentence at a time, but you're going to have to fill in, with actual paragraphs and explanations and things like that. But what it really means is just go line by line as you write your paragraphs, right? Once you have your rough draft written, from introductory paragraph all the way through your concluding paragraph, then it's time to revise. And again, we will discuss the revision process in more detail later in the term, once you guys are actually at the point where you're writing your rough draft. But, you know, just keep in mind that there are sort of 2 stages to the revision process. Technically, there's 4 levels of revision, but I kind of just, for right now, am kind of differentiating it on 2 levels. There's revising content and revising sentences. And again, when we tell someone, okay, it's time to revise your draft, they will spend all their time over here in this section, just looking at the grammar and mechanics, point of view, wording, verbs, style, sentence structure, spelling. And that's not where you want to start. You need to start over here on this side, revising content. Right, so is my essay unified? Meaning, do I have a focus topic that is clearly stated in my thesis statement in my introductory paragraph? Do all of my main points truly support and back up that focus topic? Do I have unity? Is my essay supported? Are there separate main points that directly relate to my focus topic, my thesis statement? And then, do I have enough evidence, enough support for each main point? And then, do I have coherence? Is my essay organized? Are my main points organized in a way that makes sense? Like the order of them? Is it logical? Is it effective? Have I connected my train of thought? Have I guided my readers through my train of thought from one idea to the next, from one main point to the next? That's where you have to start. When you are writing a research paper, you have other elements that go into this side of the revision table. You have things like, is the essay in APA format? Have I followed all the rules of APA formatting? Have I used my sources effectively? Have I integrated my sources effectively? Have I cited my sources correctly? Is my references page correct? So adding the research component, the APA format component, adds even more that you have to then consider over here on the content side, which again, we will talk about later in the term. But I just really need to point out now that revising is really most of the time spent over here on this side. And not a whole lot of time should be spent over on this side. Obviously, if you do not have the strongest grammar and mechanics skills, you might end up spending a good bit of time revising your sentences. But it's still the last step, because it doesn't matter how perfect your grammar and mechanics are if the content of the essay is poor. If you're lacking unity, if you're lacking support, if you're lacking coherence, if the APA format and research components aren't solid, then it doesn't matter if you have sentence level errors or not. That's why you do this side first, because if you spend 30 minutes going through and correcting grammar and mechanics errors first, only to find out that half of those paragraphs need to be completely reworked, you just wasted that 30 minutes because half of those sentences aren't even there anymore after you've done this step. So you want to tackle the big issues first, save the small sentence level issues for last. All right. So that is the writing process. 4 steps that correspond to those 4 bases. unity, support, coherence, and sentence skills. Next week, we are going to be learning about all the elements of an essay. We'll look at introductory paragraphs, thesis statements, body paragraph, and concluding paragraph. Talking about your thesis statement and your body paragraph is really where unity, support, and coherence come into play, because that's where you're establishing your point, right? Make sure you have unity. You're going to follow through on that point. Support comes in your body paragraphs, and most of the coherence comes in your body paragraphs. All right, but we will definitely learn about introductory paragraphs and concluding paragraphs as well next week. Sentence skills. I save those until I believe week 6, when you're working on your rough draft. There will be a whole week of grammar and mechanics lessons that you'll go through, hopefully, as reminders and refreshers. But you know, plenty of resources given to you in those lessons. So next week, though, we're really going to be looking at unity, support, and coherence. We learned about the 4 common pre-writing techniques that you can use to discover your topic and your focus topic and your main points, and how you can use that plus outlining to create support and organization, and then how you would then write the first draft and then move on to revising. So I highly suggest using pre-writing techniques. Again, for project part 1, you'll have to use 2 of them. I highly suggest using an outline too when the time comes. Either a scratch outline or a more formal outline. It can be as detailed or as rough as you want it to be, as you need it to be. Some people do fine just jotting down the ideas on those lines. Other people need sort of more full sentences on those lines to fill in the outline. It's totally whatever you need, but I highly suggest using one in some form when the time comes. If you have questions about the writing process, anything that I've gone over here, outlines, anything, definitely reach out. Otherwise, you are free to go ahead and move on to the next thing.